Making a difference. Often we look at huge problems like Haiti, or even problems here on our own island, and we can almost throw up our hands and say, well, it's so overwhelming, what can I possibly do? Because I've never lived through such a crisis in Haiti, although I did live in the San Francisco area and saw the aftermath of a huge earthquake there where bridges and things were still not repaired years ago. It is much more familiar to think about stories like Hannah and families that become blended or loss or death or change on a very personal level. One of the reasons I like the story this morning about the children was, Andy, your involvement, and Lucy, your involvement with this. That's worth more than 1,000 sermons to kids. Because we know that children learn by what they see being done and by the examples that are set for them, not what they are told to do. We have, in recent decades, come to a point where often adults are saying, don't do as I do, do as I say, if not directly by example. But the power of Hannah's grandmother in teaching her the ways of becoming from a young adolescent to becoming a young woman were part of what was so necessary for her life, and times have not changed. Those kinds of differences we make in the lives of children and young people and friends and neighbors count. Yesterday at the hotel, right before I was ready to start my Saturday morning class in Auburn, we were using a couple of conference rooms, and Catherine was teaching in one and I was teaching in another. I saw people begin to fly around in a serious way and head toward the parking lot. And so one of the students said to me, there was a very elderly woman who came out of the hotel, and she was using a walker, and she collapsed and hit her head and ended up with a concussion, and people were flying around. We would no more think for one moment to ignore that than the man in the moon. If we were there, we would have called 911 or done something. I know you would have, and I would have too. We would have done whatever we could to help. But our faith is not just what we do when others see us. It's how we are when no one sees us. It's how we are when we're with children or with people who are elderly. One of the huge problems in our culture is elder abuse. That's not a surprise. Making a difference does not have to be huge. We don't have to always be heroes. Numbers of people, I guess in the fire department last week, became involved when Linda Nelson went through the ice or whatever in Long Cove. And thankfully she's safe this morning. But sometimes the difference that we make can be very small. It's teaching our children to, when they see a piece of trash on the floor, pick it up, even if they didn't put it there. It's learning to be hospitable. Even when we don't particularly care for somebody, we learn to be hospitable and at least polite and kind. The story in the gospel this morning of Jesus and Mary first is significant because Jesus was a friend of theirs, and he went to their house for a meal. Now we have to understand culture. it was customary, because they walked around with sandals and dust and dirt, to, upon entering a house, have the opportunity to wash up, including washing your feet before you have dinner. And Jesus, in the story that John recounts, showed up, and obviously Mary, who deeply loves him, brings a pan and washes his feet, massages them, and anoints his feet with a special perfume. The point was, she was going beyond even normal hospitality. She was putting her best foot forward. And that little story made it into every one of the 4 Gospels in some form or another. A simple act of hospitality. A simple act of kindness. Extraordinary generosity. When we make a difference in the lives of people, it can be as simple as looking at them and saying, "Good morning, and I'm glad to see you. How are you?" It can be just as simple as, "Gee, I was just thinking about you. Let's have coffee." Those simple things in the lives. I believe a nation and a people, if there is a final judgment, I think one of the things we're going to be critiqued on is how we treat children, and how we treat people who are less fortunate than we are. In fact, didn't Jesus say something about that? There's a story about a final judgment where Jesus is talking to people, and he says, "I was hungry and you didn't feed me. I was thirsty and you didn't give me anything to drink. I was in jail and you didn't visit me." And in that parable, that people respond and say, "Well, when, Lord, were you in prison?" Or, "When, Lord, were you hungry?" Or, "When, Lord, were you thirsty?" Certainly, we would have done that. He said to them, "When you do it to the least among you, you have done it to me."